Welcome to the third week of our study, Angels Among Us. You'll want to have your Bible open to Matthew chapter 1, verse 18 and following, and also to have your study guide materials available to you as we move through this section. This week's story is we meet Joseph, who is the earthly father of Jesus. Not much is spoken in the texts about Joseph, but what we do know is that he has a good pedigree, that he is an honorable man, that he is a man who is faithful to the one God of Israel, and that he believes in the messages of angels. Matthew is very concerned that Jesus, through Joseph, be linked to the kings of Israel, and so he gives us a lengthy lineage that is not consistent with the same lineage that you will find in the book, the Gospel of Luke. So Matthew goes through several, and there are two people in particular that I want to highlight, and those are the two women that appear in this lineage. Very, very uncommon to have women in anybody's lineage back in Israel because women were not considered to be part of any family or any heritage. The two women are Tamar and Ruth. So let's look first at Tamar. That's the root of the name Tamara or the current name Tammy. It also means fruit. She was the daughter-in-law of Judah, and at first the wife of his firstborn son. He was very wicked, and so God smote him. She then married Onan. His father asked him to marry her so that his brother would have children as a heritage. This was standard practice under ancient Judaic law. Well, Onan married her, but he did a particular type of reaction to her, and so that the sperm would not inseminate her. And he was doing this because the firstborn child would get a double share of the family's inheritance. And if the firstborn child had died, then the second son would inherit it, and he was the second son. But because he was wicked in doing this, God also smote him. Judah believed, therefore, that Tamar was cursed, and he would not provide his third son to her. So she was desperate. She belonged to the family. She wanted to have offspring for this family. And when he decided to take his sheep to another town to have them shorn, she went ahead of him, and she disguised herself as a prostitute. Judah didn't recognize her under her veil, and so he hired her services. Her cleverness in asking for 3 pledges as payment allowed her to have items that belonged to him, which ultimately resulted in her not being killed. Those items were, first of all, a goat, second, his ring, and third, his seal. By him, she had twins, Perez and Zerah. She thus figured prominently in the lineage to King David through Judah and their son, Perez. Her characteristic of being assertive, of being loyal to family, and being very clever were attributes that were then passed down through the lineage and given to others in the Judaic lineage in Israel. Ruth was the other woman, and you may know more about her than you did about Tamar. Ruth is from Moab, and she married a son of Naomi. Well, while they were living abroad, Naomi's husband, Ruth's husband, and the other son of Naomi, all 3 of them died. Naomi tried to send Ruth back to Moab, but Ruth responded, "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." We often hear this comment used at wedding services, and it had nothing to do with marriage. Naomi cared for Ruth, and she arranged for her to meet Boaz, whom Ruth eventually married. Their grandchild, Jesse, is named in the lineage of Joseph. You might know the line of Jesse's lineage coming, as men of old have sung, from the Advent hymn, "Lo, how a rose ere blooming." Ruth's presence not only provides an ancestor for Joseph, but shows that not only Israel, but all the world is included in the good news of Jesus Christ. Well, if Jesus is actually the Son of God and not physically of Joseph, some people would say, well, then how can he possibly have this lineage? But in ancient Jewish law, the way for someone to establish sonship was simply for the father to acknowledge that this is his child, his son. There was no DNA test available. And so if Joseph said, okay, this is my son, so be it. And all of the attributes of lineage and of bestowal of blessing would come from Joseph to Jesus. We also need to be aware of what betrothal is, and I mentioned it briefly in the last lesson, but that betrothal is more than an engagement. We often hear that misinterpreted in today's modern language editions of the Bible. The betrothal was actually the ceremony which bound a man and woman to each other. And so if a husband died, the woman was called a widow. A man called his betrothed his wife. If they traveled together, they are regarded as a married couple. The only step further that is necessary to fully establish them as a married couple in community is for the man to take the woman home to live with his family and to consummate their relationship. And often this step is celebrated by hosting a wedding feast. In today's Western society, as I said, we have no parallel for this. An engagement today is simply a promise to marry, not a ritual in which the couple is already bound together as one. There are some Asian cultures in which the betrothal is closer to the Jewish understanding. Well, Joseph had not yet taken Mary home to be with his family, possibly because he was preparing a place for them, or even making plans for the wedding feast. But it was also not yet uncommon at that point, not at all uncommon, for young couples who are already betrothed to have relations, and sometimes a pregnancy would ensue. The simple matter would be that the man would agree to continue this relationship and have the wedding feast. The couple would begin their shared married life together. So we know that Joseph and Mary were beginning this process. We're moving toward living together permanently. And then comes the visit of the angel, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So when Joseph finds out that Mary is pregnant, he had three choices when he heard about it. The first is to expose her as unfaithful and have her stoned to death. The second would be to give her a writ of divorce in front of two witnesses, absolving his responsibility to provide for her. And the third is to fulfill the marriage covenant with her. His initial decision, which Matthew records for us, is to divorce her quietly. And it's in that mind that he fell into fitful sleep. It is into that mindset that the angel comes to Joseph in his dreams and tells him not to be afraid to take Mary as his wife, that is to say, to commit to the covenant he made in the betrothal. And so we know that he has been invited by the angel to continue this committed relationship, to be the earthly father of Jesus by being the earthly husband of Mary. One question that you'll find in this study is something that is not directly related to the study of angels, but it is a question for scholars and even contemporary Christians to think about. Why does Joseph disappear from all of the stories in the gospel? After Jesus and Mary and Joseph are in Jerusalem for the feast, and Jesus stays behind in the temple talking with the elders, Joseph and Mary go looking for him. That's the last time we hear about Joseph in any of the Gospels. There are a lot of reasons that might have happened, and you can read about that, some of the answers in the study. But let's turn to the angelic visitation. And the first one, on this first slide, you'll recognize that a little town of Bethlehem, while mortals sleep, the angels keep their watch of wondering love. This depicts the angel appearing to Joseph in sleep and letting him know that it's proper, that it is God's will that he should continue to be with Mary, to take Mary as his wife, and to live together. The next slide gives another rendition of the angel visiting Joseph in his sleep. So we know that here we have this couple ready to be married. The angel lets Joseph know it's okay. And then Joseph, the next slide, takes Mary as his wife. So we have these angelic visitations. The first comes to Joseph in a dream, the other two as well. And the other characters in the Christmas narratives experience angels in a state of wakefulness. But Joseph has all of his three visitations in dreams, and we wonder why that is. So after he visits the angel visits Joseph. The second one, is after the baby is born, a few months later, when they're living in Bethlehem, and Herod has threatened to kill all the young babies, and the angels come and tell Joseph to take Mary right away. That's by night. Right away, get up, take your wife and your child, and get out of Dodge. And so they head to Egypt. And the third is after the death of Herod, when he realizes it's safe for him to return to Israel, and so he takes Mary and the baby, now the young child, back to Nazareth, whereby Jesus is later called a Nazarene. If you want differences in Nazarene and Nazarite, you can reflect back on the lesson on Zechariah in the first week of this study. So the angel also tells Joseph that this child is to be called Jesus, which is not a name in the family history. Again, as with John the Baptist, a unique name is given. Jesus is the anglicized version of Joshua or Yeshua, which means God is salvation. You can reference Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, where it says, "A virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call him Emmanuel, God with us." That reference is to the salvation of Judah from the Syrians in the 8th century BC, but it is here used as allegory by Matthew for the time in which he lived. Some scholars note that the Hebrew word for virgin is alma, and the reference in Isaiah uses ha-alma, which means that is particular virgin, a name often attributed to the Holy Spirit. In the apocryphal Gospel of Hebrews, Jesus refers to his mother as the Holy Spirit. So now we know that Joseph is taking Mary as his wife. They are already living in Bethlehem, which we'll find out about a little bit more in the next section. And she is waiting the birth of this child, and Joseph has agreed that this child's name would be Jesus. You can move in your text a little bit further over and look at the questions. So why do you think that the angelic visitations to Joseph appeared only in dreams and not in a physical confrontation or a real-time confrontation as the angel did with both Zechariah and with Mary? How would you respond to a dream such as this? I was on choir tour in seminary choir, and one of my colleagues came to me the next morning and said to me that she had the dream of an angel visiting her and telling her she was to be the mother of the second coming of Christ. After I caught my breath, and we shared that with a couple of our sisters in the choir, the question arose, is this true? How would we believe this? It doesn't appear to be what the scripture says, but then Mary was uncertain as well, and so was Joseph. We eventually figured out that it was not a true prophecy. But in the moment, there is that question, is this truth? What is this telling us? You can think about how would you respond to a dream that came to you, such as this. In the dream sequence to Joseph, the angel is nameless. Who do you think the angel is? Is it the same angel at all 3 times? How does this angel differ in style from the angel visits to Zechariah and Mary? And why does this angel only tell Joseph to not be afraid to take Mary as his wife and not open with, "Fear not"? For Joseph's own encounter with this divine apparition, I'm quite certain, even in asleep, Joseph must have been fearful. Why do you think Matthew tried so hard to include Joseph's lineage in the birth story of Jesus? Would it make any difference if Jesus did not come through a kingly ancestry? Make a connection between the lineage account and those who visited Jesus after his birth. Contrast this with those who visited Jesus in his life, or in Luke. Why would it have been important for Matthew to give Jesus a royal bloodline and royal recognition? Think about the kings of ancient Israel, and King David the beloved, which is more the one on whom Luke centers, whereas Matthew likes the whole kingship lineage, that Jesus must have royal blood in him, because you will recall that kings had the divine right with them. They were considered to contain attributes of divinity, and so their rulings were not just human governance, but were also the gift of voice from God. So perhaps that's one reason why Joseph knew that Jesus would need to be a king, according to Matthew. Now try to imagine the conversation between Mary and Joseph after the dream that Joseph experienced. Do you think Mary would have been insulted that Joseph did not believe Mary at first, but only believed her after he had his own dream? The child is to be named Yeshua. This is not a name in the lineage. And I suspect that all of the grandparents in these stories would have been a little insulted because the grandfather's name, or at least the first letter of the grandfather's name, should be the name given to the male child. So why would Joseph not question the name of Jesus? How do you think this was received when he was presented for circumcision on the 8th day for naming, and then at the purification on the 40th day? How do you think all the neighborhood would have responded when told that this child's name would be Jesus and not Jacob or some other name in the family history? Why do you think that Matthew told these stories when the other gospel writers and even the non-canonical gospels did not include this story, did not include these stories about Joseph and the visitation of angels? If the stories of Joseph's angelic visitation were meant in metaphoric style and not factual, would that change who Jesus is for you? In other words, if this didn't really happen, but was just a way of Matthew telling a story to assert that everything was mystical and mysterious, that God was pulling all the strands of this story together, would that make a difference for you in who Jesus really is? And what does this part of the study, what does it teach you about angels? What does it tell us about the purpose of angels, about the way angels interact with humans? Have you had a dream sequence sometime where you felt that you had a word from an angel? If so, go and revisit that moment if you can remember the dream. Think about how God may have been talking with you through the voice of an angel in your dreams. We'll see you next week in the next lesson. Thank you.